Connectivity supply chain. What is it? Why should we care? How many of you have heard about supply chain? I think all of us at this point can probably say, yes, we've heard about supply chain because it's been very heavily in the news. It's been publicized quite a bit. In fact, you go back to the Colonial Pipeline and we're talking about the supply chain of oil delivery and the entire eastern seaboard being kind of shut off from that crude oil as a ransomware attack impacted another type of supply chain, such as the billing application that Colonial was using. And so we all know kind of what supply chain is at this point, but what is the connectivity supply chain in this instance? When we talk about connectivity, we're talking about what makes the internet work, what makes it tick, the underlying functionality of it. There's some key types of devices and services that we want to focus on here. There's DNS servers, whether they're authoritative, they're resolvers, or whatever they might be. DNS servers, internet exchanges, things that process these internet transactions. Then you also have VPNs that we all understand that during COVID, VPNs became very critical for accessing organizations' networks. And even some schools use it, and even more so in the gaming industry now. In fact, the vast majority of DDoS attacks have some form of gaming related motivation, whether it's I want to knock off my competitor, or I'm betting on this match and I want the opponent to lose, and so I'm going to launch an attack. And so more and more gamers are being pushed to use VPNs, commercial VPNs. And so these things are really connect us together. Now, what happens when an adversary starts going after these and taking them down? The reality is that these have much more far-reaching collateral impact than maybe a target against an individual organization or a mom and pop shop, or maybe an individual gamer here or there that, somehow through their VoIP connection, we got their individual IP address and so we can go and attack them. Well, what if that gamer is now using a commercial VPN node that's servicing 1,000 or 10,000 other gamers at that time? Well, if they launch an attack against it and they're successful, they're going to bring down that VPN concentrator for all of those users. How much more impact do you have if you manage to take off a DNS server or authoritative DNS server for some really big organization? It's going to have a very, very large collateral impact. There's a lot of different things in the DDoS space that cause this collateral damage. In fact, a couple of years ago, we saw some targeting of financial institutions. And the adversaries may not have known this, but the financial institutions had all of their connections coming through a particular data center. And unbeknownst to the adversary, there was a lot of satellite communications going through that data center. And so by targeting these financial institutions, they actually took down the satellite comms for a large number of people, causing that collateral damage. And again, we would consider that connectivity supply chain because you're knocking off the vehicle by which we communicate nowadays. And so we're seeing an uptick in this. Not only are we seeing it in the commercial space, I think we recorded about 40,000 DDoS attacks against commercial VPNs. And that's not even looking at all commercial. That's just taking the public IP addresses we essentially scraped off of websites. We've also looked at the different corporate VPN targeting. And it's a much more narrow lens that we have to look at because not every corporation is going to label their VPNs as vpn.company.com. Now, where they do, that becomes a problem. That becomes a security risk because there's a group called Lazarus Armada, a DDoS extortion group that specifically does network reconnaissance. They look at the IP addresses, they do reverse lookups, and they figure out what domains are hosted there. And they started to find things like vpn.company.com. And then all of a sudden they're launching attacks against those VPN concentrators. And so we're very much seeing adversaries explicitly going after that connectivity layer. And so when we talk about connectivity supply chain, we're talking about these adversaries going after the vehicle and the means by which we communicate today. And so it's very important that we understand that this is happening. And as organizations, as internet service providers, we need to ensure that we're very, very carefully protecting these assets because it's not just one person impacted, it's not just one business impacted, it's much more far reaching. And so the benefit of what we see in this space is that a lot of these big servers, the DNS servers, the internet exchanges, even some of the VPNs, they are very well protected. And we want to continue that. We want to nail that home. And so we want to educate people that these attacks are happening, double down on that security, ensure you're testing it, make sure you can handle these attacks as they come in. So let's keep in mind the connectivity supply chain as we think about our security posture.